on today's Story Beat.
Here's a great Meryl Streep story I love so much. I was working out the schedule for Into the Woods, and I sat Meryl down and I said, Meryl, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that I'll bring in the cast, we'll work for about 3 weeks, and then we'll have you come in, and then we'll focus on your work. And because I was trying to kind of not make her have to sit around. And she said, okay, so wait, let me get this straight. So everybody's there, the entire company except for me. And everybody's getting to know each other, everybody's working on this piece. And then in she comes. That's how she said it. She goes, are you kidding me? I want to be there from the very first moment. She goes, I'm playing the witch. I'm in everybody's business. I need to be part of the whole process. And I thought, okay, this is why she's a great actor.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Rob Marshall, has made numerous films that have been honored with a total of 30 Academy Award nominations, winning 9 in all, including Best Picture for Chicago, which alone won a total of 6 of those Oscars. Also for Chicago, Rob received the Directors Guild Award and nominations for Best Director for the Oscar, Golden Globe, and BAFTA Awards. Additionally, he won Best Directorial Debut from the National Board of Review and the New York Film Critics Online, as well as the American Choreography Award. Most recently, Rob directed and produced the live-action feature The Little Mermaid for Disney, starring Halle Bailey, Melissa McCarthy, and Javier Bardem. Rob's other directorial achievements include multiple nominations for award-winning features like Memoirs of a Geisha, 9, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, which went on to gross over $1 billion worldwide, Into the Woods, and Mary Poppins Returns. Rob executive produced, directed, and choreographed the NBC TV event Tony Bennett, an American Classic, for which he won his second Directors Guild Award. He's also won 3 Emmys for direction, choreography, and Outstanding Variety Music or Comedy Special. He directed and choreographed the Disney ABC movie musical Annie, which received 12 Emmy nominations and won the prestigious Peabody Award. For choreographing Annie, Rob also received an Emmy and an American Choreography Award. He's received the Humanitas Prize for co-writing Mary Poppins Returns and other awards from the Art Directors Guild, the Cinema Audio Society, the Costume Designers Guild, as well as the Annie Award, the Hamilton Award, and the Chita Rivera Award. Rob's extensive stage work includes the Broadway productions of Cabaret, Little Me, Victor Victoria, Damn Yankees, She Loves Me, Company, and Kiss of the Spider-Woman. He's been nominated 6 times for the Tony Award, and he's a George Abbott Award winner. For the record, Rob and I are both graduates of Taylor Alderdice High School here in Pittsburgh. Rob is also an alumni of Carnegie Mellon University's top-rated School of Drama. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm deeply honored to have the extraordinarily multi-talented and highly influential director and producer, Rob Marshall, join me today. Rob, welcome to StoryBeat.
Oh my gosh, Steve, that's so exhausting. How'd you get that? That's too much.
It's like this is your life.
Oh, it really is. I thought, wait, did that all happen?
Apparently it did.
So nice.
So let's go back in time a little bit. How old were you when you first started paying attention to theater and film and acting and performing?
Wow. Well, I was so lucky because I have great parents that took me and my sisters and exposed us to theater at a very young age. I mean, I think I was seeing Shakespeare when I was 5 or 6, and musicals early on too, touring productions, Pittsburgh Civic Light Opera and ballet and symphony. Honestly, growing up in Pittsburgh, I mean, it was so lucky to live in that amazing town because of everything that was there to, for me to see and to take in. And I have to say that I feel like immediately I knew what I wanted to do. I didn't really know that directing and choreographing was sort of in my world early on, but I did feel that this was a world I wanted to be a part of.
On stage.
on stage. I never thought about film, television, wasn't fully aware of that. But I mean, when I was growing up, variety shows were so big, musicals were sort of a big deal in our house for sure. And so I knew that I was drawn to that genre.
And did you get training early on?
We went to a great school called Falk School, which is part of the University of Pittsburgh.
Sure.
It's a lab school and it's still there, amazing school. And it was a very creative school. It encouraged creativity in so many ways. I was sort of surrounded by that, by arts and, not only sort of just singing, but also, painting and those kind of arts. And it was a perfect place for myself to go and my sister.
Hmm.
We felt, it was a place that was an experimental kind of school in the 60s and early 70s. So there was not a lot of judgment, and it was really about inspiring you to sort of let you be yourself and let you create. And so that was, I think, I would say that was the first place that I found myself being able to express myself as an artist, even as a young kid.
Did it continue in that way when you got to Alderdice?
You know what? I think what happened to me just sort of in between folk school and Alderdice was the Pittsburgh Civic Art Opera.
Hmm.
My sisters and I, all three of us, auditioned for The Sound of Music. We had no lessons, as you asked before. We had none of that, but we had done school plays and things like that. We didn't have any resume pictures or anything like that. And I remember going to the audition, the three of us, looking around with people with like 8x10s and, black and white glossies and resumes. We had none of that. We took ourselves in the backyard with like little handwritten resumes. I mean, it was pathetic. But anyway, but what was great was all three of us got the show. I have to credit that to this amazing director named Milton Lyon, who was the director and also the musical director of these shows that season. And I think he wanted real kids, kind of natural kids. So all three of us, that was our launch into this sort of professional theater. I mean, real professional theater.
So, what fundamentals did they teach you that perhaps have stayed with you all these years?
Oh, goodness, the seriousness behind the work, I mean, a lot of people don't understand that, the art is not just sort of like fun and games, it's a real craft. And we saw that around us, all the ensemble people were from either Carnegie Mellon or Point Park or University of Pittsburgh, really local, great talent, but also, seeing these wonderful actors from New York who were around us, we saw the seriousness behind the work as well as the joy, of course, and of it. But it was like, well, this is the real thing. And I have to say, I could not have been launched in a professional way, in a more perfect way, because it was so fulfilling to be with these people and just watching and learning. Mostly, I mean, I felt that mostly watching other shows, like we were watching rehearsals for West Side Story or The Music Man, and watching the dancers specifically for me. And it was mind blowing. That was life changing as well.
You were early on inspired by the dancing part of that world, yes?
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing like that. I mean, what room do you want to be in? Do you want to be in the room where they're doing a scene, or do you want to be in a room where they're actually dancing? I mean, it was so thrilling. And of course, watching, as an example, West Side Story, which is, and my dear friend Lenore Nemetz played Anita in that.
Indeed.
And watching how that came together, we were so lucky to sneak in and sit in the corner and watch and observe. And I mean, I never thought I could do that and be a dancer, which I ended up being a dancer and a choreographer and all of that. But it was thrilling.
And you bring up the great Lenore Nemetz. She has been a guest on this show too, and what a major talent to come out of this town for sure.
Oh my gosh. The thing about Lenora is that she was my inspiration, no question.
Mm.
Seeing her in productions at the Playhouse and CLO, watching her grow as a performer. I mean, we saw her at the Odd Chair Playhouse in shows like Once Upon a Mattress, Dames at Sea. I mean, that talent was beyond belief. And she was only in her 20s. And then, of course, went off to do Chicago and understudied Gwen Verdon Cheetah Rivera. And, and that was our connection to New York City. And we went and saw her there. So, just that talent and who she is. And she was like a sister to us, even as we were younger. She was, part of the family in a way. She really inspired me to do what I do. And you know what? And does to this day.
It's very interesting that she went on and did Chicago, and she understudied and went on, I think, on the same day for both Cheetah Rivera and Gwen Verdon.
Yes, that's that famous story. She did both roles in one day, which is insane. But
Insane.
it shows the sort of the breadth of her talent, the range of her talent. You know, she can do anything. And we saw her the opening night. She took over for Cheetah in the role of Velma. We were there that night, and that's the first time I met Cheetah Rivera. You know, I don't know, I was probably 15. You know.
And isn't it amazing or weird in life that things happen where you then go on and make Chicago as a movie? I think that's amazing.
No, it's a surreal thing. I mean, it was the first Broadway stage I ever stood on. Lenore took us backstage and we stood on the stage and looked out, and that was the first time I was ever in the theater like that. And from that perspective, and I mean, if I knew then, you know, at that moment, like you'll be making the film of this, you know, later in your life, it just wouldn't make sense. I wouldn't have believed you for half a second, you know?
Did it supercharge your desire to do more of it?
Absolutely. I mean, once you have the bug and you're bitten like that, you know, it's in your blood then. You know, and the next season, I remember I went back to play Louis in The King and I, and Anna's son. And so that was a whole nother experience to play that role. And it was just, it just sent me into this world. I knew this was where I felt at home.
How long did you work at things, including at CMU, before you thought to yourself, you know what, I not only love this, but I'm actually good at it? When did that occur to you that this is something you could do?
You know, it's funny. I did a show. It's funny you asked that because I haven't really thought about that. It's a great question. I did a show out at a club called Ben Gross's in Pittsburgh. The great Tom Brockett put together this show. I was probably 16 or 17, and there were 5 of us in the show. It was called Places, Please. I was in that show. I had a few solos and things like that in it. And I remember there was an article that came out. I guess it was the review from the Pittsburgh Press, and it said, and the headline, like even before you open up, like on the front of the arts page, said, "Will he be the next Gene Kelly?"
Oh, wow.
And who was from Pittsburgh as well.
Yes, indeed.
So I have to say that moment, I thought, oh, wait. I never believed it fully, but I thought, wow, oh, I see, maybe I have, you know, some talent, you know, in a way that I thought was special. And it's just because, you know, when someone gives you encouragement at that age, it's life-changing, really.
So strangely that you bring up Don Brockett. In 1975, the year before the bicentennial, I performed during the whole summer of 75 in a Don Brockett show called the Bicentennial Wagon Train.
Oh my gosh.
We performed at Kennywood Park. We performed all over Pittsburgh. Oh, yeah.
I probably saw it. I probably saw you on stage. I'm sure I did see.
Well, I was in it.
That's incredible.
So am I correct that you eventually stopped dancing because you had a herniated disc? Is that right?
Yes. So I had a sort of a Broadway career coming out of school. I went into the production of Zorba. Was my first Broadway show. I did a chorus line with Michael Bennett, did a show called The Rink with Cheetah Rivera and Liza Minnelli and Lenora. She stood by for Liza. Did The Mystery of Edwin Drood. I did Cats. But anyway, when I was in Cats, it was a very difficult show. And because I was one of the first, or actually was the first, quote unquote, like real dancer to play this part I was playing, which was called Monk Struck, which was like the narrator role. Gillian Lynn came back, the choreographer, and re-choreographed the show for me and gave me much harder things to do. So I had a really difficult show. And I have to say that a couple of months into the show, I was in great pain. It was to dance like a cat is really sort of not human. And so it's really brutal on your body, especially what I was doing. And so I herniated a disc in my lower back and left the show, and then I had a choice between an operation and bed rest. And I decided to rest it because I was only 27. And I thought, I'm just going to rest and see if I can heal this, which I did. But then when I went back, the first thing someone asked me to choreograph a production down in Florida. I never really thought about that. I mean, I had been the assistant choreographer and dance captain of a lot of these shows and television shows as well. And someone said, would you like to choreograph this? And I thought, oh, that would be really great. What a great way to go back in without having to, you know, perform 8 times a week. And it literally changed everything for me because I felt immediately at home choreographing. I felt like right in where I should be. And it's something I had thought about, but I didn't think I would be doing it in my 20s. I thought I'd be doing it in my 40s, like when I couldn't dance anymore, And it just started earlier than I thought, but it kept rolling. And then I just started choreographing everywhere.
So it turns out an injury actually turned into a whole other career.
It's funny how that works that way. It's like you come up against a brick wall and you can either just keep hitting the brick wall, or you can, or the stream can take you around the brick wall and take you on another path. And I think that's such an important life lesson for me and for others. And when I speak to people, I feel like you have to listen to the rhythm of life, and how life is taking you, because there's a reason, like there's a natural reason, a flow, you have to let it go. And it was naturally taking me there, and it felt right to me.
Well, not every choreographer winds up being a director, though in a way they are, but they don't wind up with that title all that often. Some do, but
Yeah.
not that often. And you clearly must have learned a lot in your time in observing other directors and choreographers, how they do what they do, or you wouldn't have even thought about doing it, I assume.
That's true. I mean, I have to say, even from back at Odd Chair Playhouse, I mean, Tom Thomas, who ran that, saw something in me and me to be a stage manager of this or that, or, I always was asked to assist or be part of the creative team in some way. And so, it happened in a very organic way. Like I didn't skip a step, it wasn't like I jumped, I was choreographing for a while. And then someone said, would you like to direct? You know what it was? It was at CLO. The director had to pull out of a show that I was choreographing with him. It was Camelot, with Stacy Keach and Ben Oslin. And Charlie Gray, who was running CLO at the time, said to me, do you think you could direct and choreograph this? And I said, I think I could. And so that was the first time I directed in a professional way. I loved it because you're absolutely right. I had watched so many great directors at that point, from the shows I was in to the shows I was working on as a choreographer. I learned what to do and I learned what not to do.
Well, it's always seemed to me that there's not a huge leap from someone who knows how to stage a dance number to someone who knows how to stage a scene. And so that's why you see, and you've done it yourself, obviously, a lot, where you're both the director and the choreographer.
Well, having served in both roles, can I tell you right now,
Sure.
choreography is much harder, and it really is a form of directing, because it just is, especially on a musical. You are doing the bulk of the work, without question. Ask any choreographer. They're creating the numbers, they're working the transitions into the scenes. The scenes are short because they're a musical, and then you're back into the number. So there's been, I mean, I have to say there's not a lot of focus on that, but to me, like for instance, when the Choreography Award at the Tonys, for example, is given, in the pre-show as opposed to in the real show, it doesn't make sense at all, because we are the ones who are actually creating the musical, no question. And so it was a very natural progression for me to move from choreography into directing, because it was this extension of what I was already doing.
For sure. Everything that I've seen that you've done, and I think the only movie of yours I haven't seen is Memoirs of a Geisha.
Okay.
But I've seen everything else.
Oh, wow.
And so it's interesting to me that even in Pirates of the Caribbean, which is not a musical clearly,
Yes.
it still has a musical rhythm and dynamic to it.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
That's just in your bones, isn't it?
Well, it's funny. You say in my bones. I remember Arthur Lawrence, the writer and director, said to me once, it's either in your bones or it's not, and I do feel it's in my bones. And when I started Pirates, I think people said, oh my gosh, can you do something of that scale? Can you, it's a $250 million budget. Can you do these big set pieces, these, massive stunt sequences and action sequences? And honestly, I said, it feels like I'm doing a musical, because instead of a musical number, you're doing a big action sequence. But it has to be choreographed exactly the same way, with all the beats and every piece of it put together. And so it didn't feel foreign at all to me. I mean, I felt when I was doing a massive fight sequence, it felt like I was doing a big production number. It felt like, I know how to do this. I mean, on paper, it doesn't look like that, but it certainly was for me.
Every single one of those sequences in that particular movie in Pirates of the Caribbean, every single sequence is a dance. It's all timing and rhythm, and what happens, this happens to that, happens to this. It's all a dance.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I literally said to Johnny Depp, because he moves so beautifully. And I said, Johnny, I just have to tell you, you are a dancer. How you work, how you move, how, physically, how you work through an action sequence, the timing of that. I said, you are 100%. He said, no, I'm not. I said, you are. 100%. I mean, great action actors, people who do action, are without question dancers as well.
So I have to ask you, you did lots of theater and you were both choreographer and a director in the theater. How did you suddenly make this leap into TV and film, which is the same thing, sort of, with a different added attraction, the camera?
The camera. Well, it was once again a very organic thing. I mean, I was asked by a director of television and I had just finished doing 3 shows on Broadway as a choreographer, Kiss the Spider Woman, and then She Loves Me and Damn Yankees. They came like right on the heels of each other. Boom, boom, boom. I had 3 shows running on Broadway at the same time. And this wonderful director named Terry Hughes, who I just adored, he said, would you ever consider doing television? I'm doing an original musical with Jerry Herman for Angela Lansbury. I mean, everything he was saying was like, are you kidding me? It was called Mrs. Santa Claus. It was on CBS. It was a holiday special, but it was an original musical written for her. And that was incredible, that experience, because Terry was so generous. He really let me try things and learn things, and he let me edit my musical numbers that I had choreographed. He let me edit them, which I couldn't believe that a director would do that.
Wow.
And so I learned about editing there. I learned about cutting. I learned, I'll never forget, I was working on a sequence, and one of the hardest things in theater as a choreographer are the transitions. How do you move from this into the next thing? And then I realized as I was filming or prepping to film that all you need to do is cut. Like, oh my gosh, I can cut and I'm somewhere else. It was so freeing. And another thing happened to me, Steve, while I was working on that I realized was that when I pictured a musical number on stage, I always saw it as a movie first. And then I would translate it to the stage, to a proscenium stage. I always saw it as a film. That's how I would open up my mind to what the possibilities of what a number could be.
So then the leap to being a film director was already there for you.
I didn't realize that until I said, why does this feel so comfortable? And the first time I directed on film was a musical Annie for television. And I was so nervous the first day of film. We were filming at Universal Studios right next to the Jurassic Park ride, like literally like right by the Universal Studios, park where they have all the rides. And in the Jurassic Park music, John Williams music was playing so loud as I was getting out of my car, walking to the sound stage. And I thought, it was like, bah, 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 bah. I can't remember the exact, but it was like that big, and I thought, I'm going to pass out, But then I walked on stage. And I remember the first time I actually sat in the director's chair to start, I didn't say the word action. I couldn't say it. It wouldn't come out of my mouth. It wouldn't come out of my mouth, Steve, because it felt cliche. Action, so I said, okay, and anytime you want to go, like, I don't even know what I said, but I didn't say action.
Well, you can always do what Clint Eastwood does, which is just to say, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, that's good. That's probably exactly what I said. By the end of that one day, I felt very at home. And one of the reasons was I felt like I was ready in a way. Liza Minnelli once said this wonderful thing to me when I was working with her on the rink. I was 23 years old. She gave me this piece of advice, and I've never forgotten it. She said to me, be ready when the luck comes. Be ready when the luck comes. I mean, I didn't quite understand it then, but now, of course, I understand it completely. The luck comes rarely, like, that moment where something happens and you get this, or something falls in your lap. But you have to produce, you have to be ready, And so that's what happened for me in a way with Annie. It happened actually with Chicago too. I felt one of my first feature films. I wasn't a youngin'. I was in my late 30s. I was someone who'd been around and been in a lot of shows and watched a lot and learned a lot. And I felt ready. And so then I learned to say action and cut and not have a problem with that.
So you actually were fortunate that you did a TV movie that was a bit of a delight, not some real deep intellectual piece, and so you could have fun with it.
100%. I mean, it was a perfect transition for me. It felt like a hybrid between theater and film. I rehearsed it like I was doing a show, a theater piece. That's what happens when you do musicals. You have to rehearse the dances, you have to rehearse the numbers, and I have to say I had an incredible cast, all from the theater. So Victor Garber, Audrey McDonald, Kristen Chenoweth, Alan Cumming, Kathy Bates. I had people from the theater who spoke my language. I felt very comfortable in that setting, even though we were filming and I was learning about camera. I, I remember when I was doing I was working on Mrs. Santa Claus the first time I ever did on film, and I remember I was standing looking like literally had my hands like I was looking through like a telescope, and I remember one of the grips hit me and said, you put your hands like this, like a literally a U. So I was like, oh, I see. Oh, right, it's a square. It's not a circle. And what am I thinking? You know, I didn't know what I learned.
Well, everyone starts off in life not knowing how to direct a movie.
Yeah, no, that's true. And it wasn't I wasn't around movies. I was an extra in a George Romero film in college, but we knew nothing about film or television.
But you understood dance, that's for sure, and you understood staging, and you understood picture and composition and so on.
Yes.
Tell me, because I've never understood it, and I would love to hear you explain, how do you think about dance or choreography as a means to moving the story forward?
Oh, goodness. Well, what's interesting is I don't think a lot of people realize that choreographers are authors because, as a director, you get a script that you interpret. And even a song that has lyrics and music you interpret. But as a choreographer, you really have nothing. I mean, you have music, but you still actually have to create music. So you have to write basically a scenario. Like, what's the story that's going to bridge this from here to here? And I honestly know for a fact that I could, if someone said just choreograph a musical number, I could never do it. Like, it would have to have a story, it would have to have characters, it would have to have something that illuminates, something that's happening to some specific character or tells a story. And if there isn't one, then I create one because that's the only thing I know how to do. I know how to, tell a story, as you just said, through movement. And if you don't do that, then it doesn't work. Then it's like a variety show of some kind. There's just a sort of like a dance for no reason. It has to be integral. And I learned this from the people that I worked with, especially Graziella Danielle, who taught me so much about integrating the movement into the piece so that it's inextricably bound. It's a part of the story. And if you take it out, you lose the story.
And it has to have, just like every other part of the story, it has to have a beginning, middle, and end, and there has to be some intention through it, and it has all the same 7 plot points, if you want to call it that, of any good story.
Absolutely. I remember I was doing at Pittsburgh Public Theater, I was doing a show called Eleanor about Eleanor Roosevelt that Mel Shapiro, the great director, directed and I choreographed. And I remember I had done this big number. It was called the New Century Walk or something like that. It was a period piece. And I was very excited about the dance that I'd created. And he said to me, we have to put Eleanor into this. How does she see this dance? How is she part of it? She doesn't fit in. My first inclination was, oh, wait, we're going to take away from my dance, the dance, the show. And I was like, no, that's the whole point. It's the story in the dance that makes the dance. So now you see this kind of all these very wealthy people and very elegant people doing this dance and she doesn't fit in. That's what makes the piece work. But Mel taught me that, so I learned from all the great teachers around me how to take dance, how to tell story through it. And of course, that's the only way to do it.
Well, one of the hallmarks in your movies, for sure, especially the musicals, is that the dance numbers, they have a real intensity to them, but yet you can tell everything that's happening and there's a story being told within them, even though there's a lot of cross-cutting and so on. So the big difference, and what I'm really curious about, is in the theater, the audience is static and the stage doesn't move and the people on it move. But in movies, you have one more dancer, and that is, going back to what I said earlier, the camera.
Right.
That's another part of it. How did you learn to choreograph the camera into the dance?
Well, it's a luxury because then you can have people look at what you want them to look at. On stage, they can look anywhere they want. You can try everything you can with lighting to pinpoint a moment, but you can't highlight a finger, an eye, a shoulder. You can't do that. You try, but you can't. So the great thing about the control of working as a director on film, a choreographer on film, is that you have those tools to tell the audience exactly where you want them to look and what you want to see. And so in a way, it's much easier. I find it much easier. And the movement of the camera always felt very natural to me because of choreographing anyway is about movement. But like I said, when I started on film, it felt so much easier in a way for me. If I wanted to make a point of something, you push in on something, or if you wanted to, if you wanted to, like, to see a big grand moment, you cut back wide and you see the full thing. You're the great audience member. That's who you are. You can tell exactly where you want each person in the audience to look. It's great.
Well, everybody that works on movies knows that the director is taking you to exactly where he or she wants you to look.
100%.
That's what you're talking about. But do you also then think of the camera as another kind of performer in that movement?
In a way, I almost feel like they're more the audience, you know what I mean, as opposed to a performer. I feel like they are definitely integral to the whole thing. But what you're doing is you are sort of working your way through the piece in telling the story. You have the control. Filming is so interesting because it's you spend the whole day on maybe about a minute and a half, 2 minutes of the film, and you have pieces during that day, all these different setups and things. So what you have at the end is like a mosaic. You have all these pieces of a mosaic, all these little shards, and you have to put them together into a whole. That's the hardest thing of all, is actually putting it together and letting it, because you have all these little bits and pieces. But I like the idea of perfecting something just small, and then then working on sort of the big picture. I have to say, Nora Ephron, who was a dear friend, miss her so much, she once said something that I thought was so profound. She said, "Don't you wish you could see your own movie?" What she meant by that was, it's very hard when you've worked on something to step back. The way I could watch, just say a movie you directed, I could watch that movie and say, oh, well, this, that, this, because I'm just looking at it as an observer. When you're so inside something, it's very hard to step back and see the film.
Well, and you can see where all the seams are. You've constructed it so you know where all the pieces go together.
Yeah, it's hard to get that objectivity. That's the thing you do. You have the best chance of that with an audience, because you're starting to sort of see it through their eyes and ears, and you can hear where they're laughing, or where they're rustling, where they're bored. You can feel that. And so that is the one chance you have to really start seeing it from another perspective besides your inside perspective.
And one of the things that I notice about all of your movies is they are visually beautiful. And so I assume that a lot of that is because you have worked with a great cinematographer. That's part of it.
I have to say, I hit the jackpot on my first film with the greatest team of people and designers and creatives. Dion Beebe, my cinematographer, John Meyer, my production designer, Colleen Atwood, my costume designer. I've worked with them now over the course of 20 years. In fact, as we were working on Little Mermaid together, the three of us, we sort of celebrated, our 20 years together. There have been times, there are movies, Dion Beebe wasn't available to do Pirates of the Caribbean, so I worked with the great Darius Wolski, and so it hasn't always worked out that we all could be together. I've always had one or two of my team with me, but we have a real shorthand. We have worked together for so many years, and they are supreme artists. The goal of a director is, can they see what you see in your head? And to me, they surpass what I see in my head.
Isn't that grand?
It's incredible.
That's the way it is when you write scripts, because I've written a whole bunch of scripts, and you have it in your head one way, and then the actors get their hands on it, and suddenly it's a whole other thing.
Other thing comes to life in a different way. And the people that are smart, that know how to collaborate, let that happen. The people that aren't, try and hold on and push it so hard in a direction without letting it breathe and letting it grow. Because I'd be so stupid if I thought that I'm the one who has all the answers and has all the ideas. It's just not how it works. For me, the joy of working on these pieces is to see the input from all these other people. And so when I have meetings on film, and I know this is rare for a lot of filmmakers, but everybody's in the room. So I'm doing work we're discussing costumes, and I have production designer, and I have the cinematographer there. I have the editor there, my great editor, Wyatt Smith. I have everybody in the room with me to work out the sequence, because it's all integrated, and I want to hear everybody's point of view. Now, I have the final say, but to me, the best idea in the room wins.
Do you start that process before you've worked it through with the scriptwriter?
No, I start with the script, and John DeLuca and myself, my partner, John DeLuca, my husband, and also my wonderful producing partner,
Indeed, indeed.
John and I work with the writer very intensely for a long time until we feel that there's something there to be seen. Then we take it to the studio. Studio has their notes. You have to listen because a lot of their notes, aren't good, but a lot of them are good. So you have to hear what people are saying and let that in. That's important. You're all on the same team. You all want a good film. That's really important to remember. A lot of people forget that. They think they're going up against the studio, and it's not that. They want it a good one too. And then once it's in a good enough place, then I start sharing it with the people that are working on it. And then it comes to life in a completely different way. And there'll be just something that will be said, something offhand, something little. It's just like, whoa, it's like sort of a eureka moment if you're listening, if you're paying attention.
And that's true for all of note giving and taking, isn't it?
I think it's really important. I mean, people that are defensive immediately, it's not the right way to go. I mean, first of all, people just want to be heard, number one. So just let them speak and say what they want to say. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that you're not going to do something that doesn't work. But if there is a glimmer of something, there might be a terrible note, but in the middle of that note, there's one little something that might be good. So I try. I mean, it's hard. Listen, we all are human beings, but I try desperately to not feel defensive when I'm hearing something. Stay open as much as John helps me with that. John says, just stay open. You never know. The thing I love about John is he'll change anything on oh, let's just throw that all away. And I'm like, whoa. But I do like the idea of being as open as you can. I think it makes you better. And I also think then if you really feel strongly about something, then that will come out. What you feel strongly about will make you actually really sort of push for it and say, this is what I want. And then you become stronger about your point of view. So it's all good. It all leads to the right place.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because for years I've taught students that when you go to get notes from whoever, a studio, a network, whatever,
Yeah.
you're going to probably hear some things that you disagree with. You're going to think to yourself, they didn't read what I wrote. You're going to think all these things, these people are fools, or whatever you're going to think.
Yeah.
But you don't know if something will trigger some other thought for you.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, there are some executives out there who don't know what they're talking about. They're trying to justify their job or whatever, and so they're just saying anything or whatever. And you have to just be smart about that. What you can't do, though, is leave them out of the process, because they are actually the people that are letting you do this piece, right? So you have to say, okay, well, that's how this is working. So let it come to you. What sticks will stick. What doesn't will fall off. Don't worry. Don't think about the moment. Don't feel like you are being, abused in some way. You just let it happen. And then know that you will stick to what you really feel deeply, but also might learn something too.
So I've got to ask you about all these incredible actors you've worked with over time. How important is casting?
Well, I've said before that it's everything, and in a way it is, because without people to bring it to life, there's nothing. And, there are movies that I've done that if I didn't have, I'll just say as an example, Emily Blunt playing Mary Poppins as an example, there'd be no film. Because, I couldn't actually think of someone else who could play that role. And I knew that if she didn't want to do it, I wouldn't have done it. And John and I would have just not done it. It's everything, and I also adore actors. You see, having been one, I understand how hard it is. I understand the moment you say cut, you need to say something about the feedback that the worst feeling. Can you imagine being on the other side of the camera and they say, cut, that's it, okay. And there's no communication talking. They're talking about the technical part of it, and they're left out in the dark and they feel, oh my God, I'm terrible. I don't feel valued. They start to doubt themselves, all those things. It's so important that you communicate to actors. It's so important because you're creating for me, one of the goals, one of the most important things about being a director is creating a safe space where they feel that they aren't judged so that they can really try anything. And because I've worked with a lot of actors that are new to musicals, Renee Zellweger, Richard Gere, Emily Blunt, Meryl Streep, Kathy Bates. There's the list of people, Chris Pine. It just goes on and on. People that are sort of new to the musical genre, they need to feel protected enough they can actually be bad, before they get good. Do you know what I mean? Really, just throw it out there, because that's the only way you're going to actually move forward and get better. So that's very important to me, to really protect casts. I adore actors, and I love my experience with them. It's the reason to do movies for me. So yes, casts means the world.
Well, classically, directors are known to be psychologists.
100%.
What do you do? Do you figure out early on what a specific actor needs and then work that?
Well, for me, I know as an actor, positive reinforcement for me worked. So there, I start there, and I would say 99% of actors, that's what they want. They want positive reinforcement. That's great. Maybe change this, but give them positive, so they feel like not so exposed. That's really important to me.
Has it happened for you where an actor was just wildly off?
Well, it's interesting. I'll tell you an interesting story once with Renee Zellweger on Chicago. We were in the middle of rehearsing, and she stopped and said, "This is terrible. I'm terrible." She said, "Why don't you just fire me? I can't really sing and I can't really dance." And I said, "Okay, let's stop right there. Let me explain to you something. The reason you were hired was because you're playing the role of Roxy Hart. Roxy Hart is someone who is a wannabe. She wants to be a singer. She wants to be a dancer. All those rough edges that you have are the character. Roxy is singing and dancing. It's so important. If you were just a great singer, great dancer, who cares? What's so beautiful about what you're doing is that it's the character singing. The character, I said, bring all that to it. That's what this is. This isn't a talent show. This is a movie. You're playing a role, and that I love all of those rough edges. That's the best part. I said, "Do you understand?" And it was like a eureka moment for her. She was like, "Oh, I get it. It's not Renee dancing and singing, in a Vegas show or something. It's Roxy Hart in this movie, in this story, expressing herself through dance and voice." It changed everything. But I think it's important for actors to know that.
I think that you just convinced me as to why it won the Oscar.
I mean, that was the most shocking thing ever. The whole ride of that, I had no idea I didn't think anybody even see the film. So all of that was such a honest to God, complete and total shock. I will say that when I started working on that film, I really wanted to make sure that we were telling a story. A lot of people saw it as kind of like a variety show. And for me, there was a real story in there about Roxy.
For sure.
Yeah. And of course, Velma too, and Billy, but it's really, and that's why when I started to work on this with John DeLuca and with Bill Condon, who wrote it with me, we really sort of found our way in.
Did you think it was not there in the Broadway show, that what you did, what made it more complete and more understandable?
I think so, because on film you can do that. It's called Chicago, a musical vaudeville. Bob Fosse is a genius. His production was astonishing and gorgeous. And it was very much a vaudeville, told through vaudeville. In film, which is much more realistic, the only way I could see to do it was to create a story and then use sort of fantasy to tell the musical portion of it. And that had to live in two different worlds. The real story of these women, and then, of course, the fantasies, musical fantasies that took place in Roxy's head. That's how I saw it working. And that's something you can do on film that it wouldn't work on stage, And on stage, you're already, on stage, you're in a proscenium, you're in a fake environment anyway, false environment. So somebody can open their mouth to sing and it feels fine. On film, it's a very different story. If you start to sing, you better have earned it, or there better be some strong conceptual plan behind it so it feels organic. Otherwise, it's that horrible feeling, and you know what I mean, Steve, when someone starts to sing in a movie and you're like, oh, you feel embarrassed for them, And so it's really important that it feels like natural, completely organic, coming from the scene into the song.
Well, for sure they did something right in the revival, because it's almost at 30 years on Broadway.
It's incredible. I will say something, not to fully pat myself on the back or our movie on the back, but the producers who I know well, Fran and Barry Weissler, said the show was just about to close when our movie came out.
Wow.
And our movie gave it a whole new life.
Oh, indeed, then.
And they've beautifully said that to me many times over the years. And so that's been a lovely feeling, to keep a show like that, a brilliant show written by the genius of John Kander and Fred Ebb and Bob Fosse, you know, have that show still playing for audiences literally today.
Well, there's no question that it's still a very popular attraction on Broadway, no question.
It is.
I want to go back to the actors for half a second, which is you've clearly worked with some just massively popular, well-known Oscar-winning actors. You've even directed one or two to an Oscar. So when you work with a Meryl Streep or with a Daniel Day-Lewis or with a Nicole Kidman, do you work with them differently than you do someone who is not famous in the show?
Not at all. Not at all. The gorgeous thing about great actors and working with them is that they're, you know, everybody when they starts from zero. Like we're all starting together. And that's the people I love. I mean, I won't cast someone who I feel comes in with a lot of baggage or a lot of attitude. No way. Here's a great Meryl Streep story I love so much. I was working out the schedule for Into the Woods, and I sat Meryl down and I said, Meryl, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that I'll bring in the cast. We'll work for about 3 weeks, and then we'll have you come in, and then we'll focus on your work. And because I was trying to kind of, you know, not make her have to sit around. And she said, okay, so wait, let me get this straight. So everybody's there, the entire company except for me. And everybody's getting to know each other. Everybody's working on this piece. And then in she comes. That's how she said it. In she comes. She goes, are you kidding me? I want to be there from the very first moment. She goes, I'm playing the witch. I'm in everybody's business. I need to be part of the whole process. And I thought, okay, this is why she's a great actor.
That's why she's a great actress. When she's in it, she's all the way in it.
And loves it. Wants to be there for every second of it.
I have to assume that Daniel Day-Lewis is the same way, considering his reputation.
100%. I mean, the gorgeous thing about Daniel, people have asked me, was it weird when he was on set, he doesn't come out of character? People have to call him by his character's name, that kind of thing. I said, are you kidding me? Weird. It's a total dream. Are you kidding? I have an actor who is so dedicated, so deep inside something, you know, doesn't leave the set. So when I say, okay, here we go, he's right there. I'm not going to get him in his trailer. He's ready on, you know, take one. He's in it so deep. It is a total joy. And he is a total joy. I never called him by his character's name ever. I called him Daniel, and that was it. I mean, he's just a consummate, he gives everything plus, which is why he's retired. I mean, I think he gave his whole life. I mean, there's like nothing left, you know, he gave everything. He gives everything. He gives blood. And it's an incredible experience to work with him, and incredible on every level as a human being, but also as an artist.
Well, he's, in my opinion, the single greatest actor of the last 50 years.
No question. And you know what? He lives it very deeply. I mean, there are different ways that people work. You know, some people would rather just have fun and be laughing and talking to the crew and then jump in, they're there, you know, that's their process. I embrace every kind of process. You know, I don't have a director style. You know, my style is to make them great, period.
That's an incredible philosophy.
It's all I care about. Protecting them, making them great, making them as great as they can be, making them feel comfortable where they're doing so they can literally fly and do their best work.
So I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm fascinated that you've come all the way up through the ranks into huge CG movies. Little Mermaid is spectacular, and the animation in it and the way that you did it is just unbelievable. How did you learn to function in that world?
Well, you know what? It was great that I was able to do a little bit of CGI in this film, little in this. Pirates of the Caribbean had an enormous amount.
Indeed.
But I did feel that by the time I got to Mermaid, I was ready, you know, ready for that next step. It was the hardest film I've ever done. Because of COVID, it took 4.5 years because a lot of prep to do. And then, of course, the year basically we lost. But then the post-production on it, all the CGI on it, every single strand of hair was added underwater, everything underwater, with the, you know, backgrounds, costumes, everything. I mean, everybody was in tracking suits and their face was there, but the face had dots on it. I mean, we were doing real work. I remember sitting the entire cast down and saying, here's the thing, this is such a complicated film. It's literally a ballet. Everybody's either on some kind of apparatus. They're either on wires or on tuning forks, they call them, or teeter-totters. No one's on the ground. So it all has to be choreographed like a ballet. And I'll be doing just pieces and then cutting, because then I have to switch you to another rig to do another something. I said, it's going to be done in so many pieces, but here's what I'm saying right now. The technical aspect of this film cannot lead the film. I don't want people to see how hard it was. I want it to look like it was easy. I want people to be engrossed in the story and really connected to you as characters. So we rehearsed it separately from all the technical parts of it. And then we added the technical parts of it. And that's how it worked. It was so complicated. If John and I weren't choreographers, I don't think we could have done it because, like I said, it was literally a ballet. And we were doing it with masks and with literally shields on our faces. So because of COVID, and we were the second movie up and running in England. Jurassic Park was first and then us over at Pinewood Studios. And we were, we felt somewhat like guinea pigs. It was so difficult. But I will say the thing I'm most proud of that film is that because it was so impossibly hard to do, that people were still moved by it because they were moved by the story, by the acting, by the work.
Oh, I think mission accomplished. There's no question. It is exquisite to look at. The effects are amazing, but it is the story. I've always said the greatest special effect we can ever have is a good story.
100%. What a beautiful way to say it, Steve. That's exactly right. People don't realize that's what everybody wants. They want to go and they want to hear or see a great story. That's the bottom line. And, we get lost in all the other things, but I'm always pushing myself because it's a very technical medium and it's become more so. And so you have to fight against that and keep making sure that you are telling a story, characters you care about, you're interested in their journey, and you want to be involved.
Well, and you have done 2 major movies with water. Good luck.
Thank you. It's true. Water's hard. Listen, it all has massive challenges. One of the things I love, though, is not repeating myself in terms of the kind of movie I do, because this is your life. These are journeys of your life, these big sort of massive films, and they take many years. So I like having a different experience each time, a different something, do something else and try a different genre. And certainly an underwater musical was not anything that I had in my head, but I'm glad to have accomplished that.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to whatever you're going to be doing in the future. I'm having one of the most incredible conversations ever on this show with Rob Marshall, and we're an hour into this thing, and we're going to wind the show down a little bit. And I'm wondering, in all of these incredible experiences you've had, and you've told us many, can you share with us a story beyond what you've already told us that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or maybe just plain funny, beyond what you've already said?
One comes to mind right away, maybe because of my first film. I remember turning to Renee Zellweger when we were working so hard on that film, because we did it very quickly. I was working like literally 6 days a week, and it was like, overtime. And anyway, we were just like killing ourselves. And I turned to her, it must have been 3 a.m. one night, we were working on something, and said, you know what, you're going to find me one day at the end of this film, face down in a pile of sequins, and we were laughing about it. Ha ha. So anyway, the movie comes to an end. I say cut on the last shot of the film. I say, that's a wrap, da da da. And she says, come here. And she pulled me into this room, but it was actually a sound stage. It was in one of the sets, and there was literally a ton of sequins. I don't know. She had got all these sequins brought in like a truckload, and she said, "Okay, now you have to fall face down in it." And she did, and we laughed so hard. So I threw myself into the pile of sequins, face down in the pile of sequins, and we laughed so hard. That was really special. She made that really fun. She was so lovely. She remembered that I had said that, and then made it come true. It was hilarious. So I love that. And another fun one, just because it's fun, just because I love him so much. Johnny Depp, we were doing Pirates of the Caribbean. We were shooting outside in Greenwich, London. And he was such a massive star. I mean, he's still a massive star, obviously. But at that point, at the height of Pirates, he was like, people were insane. And we were behind this fence, and he was doing this crazy stunt where he was standing on top of a carriage. Okay. The horse, he was on the carriage. So it's like he was like surfing on top of a carriage. So he's on this carriage, and we're about to go. So we put him up. Now, because he's high up enough, people can see him now. See, they could only see, it was a big fence around us, so no one could see. But now he's up high enough, so they're screaming, Johnny, Johnny, oh my God, I love you. All this stuff, right? And he turns to me and says, if they only knew. Why I love him so much, because he gets it. He gets it. It's like, that image is bigger than who he is, what they think he is and who he is. He's the sweetest man, honestly, the sweetest man. And he just turned to me and said, if they only knew. And it was just, I just thought that was so humble and so funny. And he's just great. I love him to death.
Well, the story that is always told about him is that when he started out, he didn't want to be a good-looking leading man. He just wanted to be a character actor.
Yeah, no, that's what he is, And it's like an accidental movie star, but he is just a divine person who comes onto the set and literally says good morning to everybody and thank you to everybody. And he's just a generous, beautiful soul.
Well, that's a good thing to know because he does have anymore. He's got some strange reputational things going on. So it's good to hear that.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you know him and you work with him, it's very clear.
Well, that's great to hear. So last question for you today, Rob. You've given us huge amounts of advice throughout this whole show, but do you have a single solid piece of advice, or maybe more than one, that you can share with those who are just starting out in the business, or maybe they're in a little bit and trying to get to the next level?
You know what? I have to say, the most important thing is to be in it for the right reasons. I think that's kind of been lost a little. I think a lot of people that I speak to or see are interested in becoming famous or stars of some kind. That happens so rarely. It's like literally winning the lotto. So what you have to do is you have to love the craft. You have to love what you're doing. I see that in Meryl Streep. She loves to do it. I remember Chris Pine turning to me as we were working on Into the Woods. He said, oh, she's so great. She's loving doing this. I said, yeah, that's why the longevity. She loves it. She wants to act. She wants to be somebody else. She gets excited about that. So you have to be in it for the right reasons. And I think, and really know that because it's the hardest business in the world, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to love it from every pore of you, not just because you want something out of it, famous or whatever. It has to be something you can't live without. You have to do, and it has to be your passion. And so I would say, make sure it's your passion. I remember I was with a director once when I was a choreographer, and this wonderful actor came in. He was lovely, handsome, sang well, acted well, walked out. The director turned to me and said, well, he has just enough talent to have chosen the wrong profession.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, you know what? That's true. Because it's like he good enough, but it's not all there. Do you know what I mean? It's not everything. You have to know that this is everything for you because it's so hard.
Well, I think that that's extremely wise. And if you're in the business and you're not succeeding at whatever you think is success,
Yes.
the question is, are you trying to continue to work on your craft and on your discipline and on your talent?
Yeah. Is it something you have to do, and can you find your way into it? But you also have to listen, right? I mean, I listened to my injury and found myself choreographing and found my way there. You have to, you can't keep butting up against a brick wall, like I was saying before. You have to learn to flow and move to the sort of the next thing. But you have to know that you're doing it because you love it and you want to do it.
For sure. If you're trying to be in the business to be rich or famous, you've made a mistake, I think.
No question. No question.
You can get there, and many people do, but that's not the reason why they got there.
But the byproduct of it, you know what I mean?
It is.
But, there will be rough times with those people too. Believe me, I know a lot of really famous actors who go through rough times of not being hired or looking for the right thing. And, everybody, it's all ups and downs. So you have to really want to do it for the right reasons, the real reason.
Well, so let me ask you then, which I've talked about this forever, which is, I'm going to guess that you've been involved in more than a few projects that didn't go through.
Yes, I have, but not many, I have to say. I've been very lucky in that way. The things that I have chosen, have been greenlit and gone forward. There are a few that haven't, but they're outweighed by the ones that have.
Because when we see the notices in the trades, it's only the ones that succeed or maybe spectacularly fail in some way, but you don't see the ones that you're working on and they just don't work out.
Yeah.
And that's going to be true for anyone, for Steven Spielberg or anyone.
And you have to let them go. You have to move on to the next thing it's not meant to be. You have to believe in that, truthfully.
Indeed. Rob Marshall, I cannot tell you how delighted I am that you've been on the show today. This has just been so much fun and so great.
Love speaking with you. I wish I could remember seeing you in that 1976 bicentennial show, because I'm sure I did. I have no question it was true. But anyway, it's so lovely to speak to you. I'm sure your students are just like overwhelmed to be working with you and listening to you and learning from you and being inspired by you. That I have no question.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.